Hello everyone, Oleg is here. Over the last years, I've had a lot of behavioral interviews. When I was more junior specialist, I was not preparing much and was constantly failing. Then, with more maturity, after working with a mentor and after a very deep study of the web, I realized that this is an extremely important topic, no less important than the technical part itself, like coding, interview, and solution architecture like system design. I found multiple useful frameworks and approaches which I'll reference today. However, I struggled to find one common end-to-end framework which will help you to transfer your daily routine experience right into your answers during the interview. After multiple trials and errors, I came up with my own framework, and I haven't found any analogs to it. The system I'm going to present during this video is constantly evolving together with the industry and my personal maturity, but it has already helped me to feel super confident during the interviews, and I started getting offers. These days, this is one of my favorite parts of the interview process, and I really enjoy and proud to talk about my past experience, my achievements, and the problems I have solved. So please enjoy the best behavioral interview preparation framework. This video will contain 3 primary sections. We'll start from the projects, from your previous experience, from your Bragg document. Secondly, we'll talk about how to find behavioral interview questions and how to answer them using your information from the past. And finally, I will show some tips and tricks about how to actually learn these answers and how to prepare for the interview. The framework is based on just one Excel document with 2 sheets, projects and behavior. Don't be afraid, the link to the template will be given below in the description. There is no need to make any notes because I'm going to guide you end to end with examples. And let's start with the first part. The first sheet, called projects, serves me as a reference about what I have worked on. This may contain companies, products, projects, pet projects, competitions, and other types of activities. Sometimes I fill this page daily, sometimes in case of long tasks and long activities, this may be even monthly. We do not achieve business goals every day, but daily tasks contribute to them. Keeping this in mind helps you not only with the interview preparation, but with the overall focus and performance at the current place of work. Each role will be just one story, one product, so I have some fictitious examples and we go column by column, just left to right. So let me start with the first example. There are some service columns which will help later to navigate the document. Industry, role, dates, tool stack, and team size. This may sound a bit extra, but with the more experience, the more projects completed, this becomes more and more difficult to remember what exact setup you have worked in. I, for example, frequently switch between data scientist and machine learning engineer on the projects, sometimes even MLOps or architect. I think something similar may be applied for front-end, back-end, and full stack. Or you can add a framework column if this makes sense to what you are doing. Filtering by role may help refresh on what kind of problems you have worked at in the past. Some values from the service fields columns are not known in advance before you start. For example, you are not aware about the full tech stack and the full team size, but you can fill them later. For some positions, you can better tailor your resume and behavioral interview answers using your experience from particular industries like healthcare, telecom, or professional services like here. Ultimately, this is for your retrospective. Personally, this helped me multiple times to find a clue on how to better customize my application to a specific position. The goal column is basically why you're here and why the project exists. Usually, this is something your manager tells you while assigning to a project. This may be save project from X, or develop X to improve Y, or just achieve some company KPI. For longer engagements, these may be some strategic goals or even some high company level goals you contribute to, or these may be even some goals you came up with yourself while working on the project on the go. Why I like this column, this helps to keep focus on the high level things that really matter. When you are drowning in the daily tasks, just look at this section and reset your focus on what really makes a difference. Let's look at our first example in more details. The project name or the company I have worked for is LinkedIn. The role I played was machine learning engineer. And let's say in advance we already know what will be the tool stack. So this may be approximate, this may be filled later, but we already know that the main cloud provider is AWS, Terraform is used for infrastructure as code, Datadog for monitoring, MLflow for machine learning lifecycle, Kafka for streaming. And these are the goals your manager came to you with, or maybe this is posted in the position description you apply for, so this may be different source. So the first one is to automate job listing text quality checks. LinkedIn is an enormous company which posts tons of listings on their platform every day. Every second, listings appear on the website and their quality has to be checked. By default, of course, this is a human routine job, so this has to be verified by natural language speakers, and of course there is a huge field for the automation here. The second goal is to build a scalable inference pipeline under some budget constraints. Let's say in our example, this will be 100K quarterly in the OpEx. We can roughly say that this is just some compute running in the cloud. And lastly, let's say that you have just randomly heard this, or maybe your manager is aware about the situation on the project, and they just say that the stakeholders are very demanding, they have very high expectations, and instead of just doing task by task by task, you have to really sometimes bargain, sometimes to negotiate and find some common ground with the stakeholders. And this is one of the main goals, because nobody but you will be able to have this conversation with the stakeholders. Now the brag column. As the description says, these are unstructured notes mainly for historical purposes and for further processing into columns to the right, which we'll cover in a bit. I have been doing this already in different formats for quite some time, but then I found the Software Engineering Guidebook by Georgi Orosh. In the book, he talks about the work log, and the work log was previously described by him in the blog post. And in this blog post, he mentions Julia Evans' brag document, so this is how I learned about that. These frameworks definitely worth your time to study. But in my framework, I just suggest some combined approach for the brag column. Now let's return back to our LinkedIn example. This is the brag column with the daily, weekly, monthly log as I would feel it for myself. Let's read it together top to bottom. I have joined on the 1st of January and immediately realized that the team is unhappy with the project scope constantly increasing. Have to figure it out after onboarding. So again, as a reminder, these are just some random thoughts I have in my mind while working on the project. The 10th of January. Suggested the stakeholder to agree on deliverables in a written form to make sure we can plan our delivery. The next day. Launched a baseline X with a tech metric Y and projected business metric Z. The 12th of January. Agreed with the team that we are fine-tuning Llama because our estimates show that OpenAI will be too costly for our inference scale. The 16th of January. Screwed up a prod build as forgot to test and dev first. Initiated a postmortem, made a request to block such build pattern. The 18th of January. Trained model X with tech metric Y and projected business metric Z. From the 19th to the 21st of January, struggling with SageMaker, fixed X, learned Y. The 23rd to the 25th, mostly reviewing data science and machine learning engineering code, had to help with the data connection issues, recommended some material to junior colleagues. The 28th, presented team solution to a tech vice president, discussed roadmap, secured the budget. On the 1st of February, got first feedback from my manager. And finally, on the 5th of February, resolved a conflict between two colleagues arguing about two AWS services. Didn't escalate. You can notice that the logs may be very different depending on your seniority level. Entries to the brag column may be the following. The first one. Today I trained some model which is 10% better than the previous one. Second. Today my colleagues had some tension, but I was able to resolve it. The third. This week I had some goal to refactor the code. The builds became X% faster. The fourth. This sprint I improved something X%. This quarter my team released something based on my design document. It is super helpful to keep your brag document open during quarter plannings and sprint demos. This is the time when people talk about their quantitative plans and achievements. The brag column is something you edit quick and dirty as soon as you have some thought in your mind. Sometimes, when I'm on the go with my own thoughts or just chatting to my friends, I even drop a quick message to myself in the social networks when I come up with a good idea of an achievement or maybe some good phrasing of what I did, and only later I append this to the brag column. On the contrary, the next set of columns contains distilled, thematic, high-quality bullet points. Challenges are the problems you encountered, both expected and not. From some perspective, these are the reasons why this project is different from the others and can't be solved via copy-pasting the existing solutions. This column may answer the questions like, why is this difficult particularly to me? Or why is this a tough task for your business? Or why this took longer than expected? The reasons may be purely technical or operational, sometimes even human factor or global events. Let's look at the challenges for our example. The first one is the undefined acceptance criteria, which leads to scope creep and demoralized team. The second challenge is that there are already some attempts to automate job listing checks and there is lots of outdated code. And finally, there is some cost pressure for the amount of inferences we want to have. It is expected to have no less than 15 million monthly invocations. Lots of companies like to ask about your failures and actions to resolve and prevent them in the future. You can start from your particular failures and then go step by step above, realizing failures your team, unit, department made. These are your very important notes which make sure you really progress. Let's see where I failed on this project. I tried to develop in a hurry and failed several builds. I tried but was not able to spread best coding practices while spent some time on citing them. Need to push better and work more with other teams. This is kind of a letter to me in the future. Lastly, I didn't identify any scope increase and was just doing what's said. This is a signal of low seniority. Learning. Usually these values are derived from your failures and how you worked on your mistakes. This may be from project feedback or just some interesting insights like I didn't know about this feature and how this helps to solve these kind of problems. Finally, one of the best sources of learning are our more senior colleagues. You can notice some interesting development pattern or mature problem-solving technique or just getting advice. This all goes here. Over time, you will see the same projects differently. After 1, 2, 5 years, you notice suboptimal decisions and missing breadth or width. I've often caught myself optimizing models just for the sake of optimizing models. These reflections are exactly why the notes matter. They let you revisit your past choices with a wider lens and evolve your approach. Looking in the past, I can mention several learnings from this project. So at first, the AWS stack. On this project, I have worked a lot with SageMaker, with Lambda and other AWS services, so this is definitely one of the main learnings on the project. Secondly, MLOps tools. For example, on this project, I have worked extensively with MLflow and I have covered the experimentation phase, the model registry phase, the deployment part. So these are more the technical things I discovered for myself on this project. This was the project where I had an opportunity to show my leadership skills and you can say in more details what kind of leadership techniques or approaches you have studied. Maybe you have played as a plane captain. You might learn some project management techniques or frameworks, maybe some templates for budgeting. And finally, of course, stakeholder management and cross-team collaboration. You can state here that you learn that this is not only important to do the technical part right, but also communicate with the stakeholders, understand their ideas, their expectations, what they care about. And also, I realized that the team of data scientists and machine learning engineers is not enough to deliver some projects. It is always beneficial to collaborate with subject matter experts, to share some expertise between the departments. So these kind of learnings on very different levels, from different perspectives, technical, less technical, you can mention here. Impact is about why it matters for the business. Mainly, it contains business countables you had and you obtained. For our example, the impact was the following. Reduced manual review load by approximately 40%. This led to freeing 35 full-time employees, approximately 2.5 million of annual saving at 70k average fully loaded cost of one employee. The second impact from our project is the expansion of the automated coverage from 25%. Previously, it was only paid job listings which were processed. Right now, these are 100%, so all the listings, both paid and unpaid. The volume increases 4 times, higher quality listings, higher trust from the users. The third one, cut average listing time to publish from 3 days to 8 hours. Listing time to publish is one of the business metrics used by LinkedIn, so with our project, with our activities, we were able to cut this from 3 days to 8 hours. Another impact point is that we were able to stabilize the cost of the infra for inference at this amount of money per month for this amount of listings we described at the very beginning. And final impact, which is not countable but also may be useful for your further answers in the behavioral interview, is that you were recognized officially by the management as a team morale savior. Now, key achievements XYZ, which are synced with your resume. Achievements are about what you built or improved and by how much. Impact tells why leadership cared, and achievements tell what I delivered. The XYZ formula which we are going to use is coined and popularized by Laszlo Bock, a former SVP of People Operations at Google. The formula is the following: accomplished X as measured by Y by doing Z. Let's look at a couple of examples on the web. Instead of analyze large datasets using BigQuery for actionable insights, you say, enhanced efficiency by 15%, X, by uncovering actionable insights through in-depth analysis of 10 million record datasets, Y, utilizing BigQuery, Z. Another example. Manage large budget for university sales club. Instead, better to use. Manage the 7K budget, X, creating contacts with 20 plus local vendors, Y, for fundraising campaigns, Z. So this is to give you the idea of how the XYZ formula works. Let's look at our example. The first achievement led the delivery of an LLM-based listening QA system, fine-tuned Llama 3, reducing manual subject matter expert effort by 40%. X here is led the delivery of a system, Y is reducing subject matter expert by 40%, and Z by doing what? By fine-tuning Llama 3. The second achievement, designed SageMaker-based inference pipeline serving 15 million requests a month. Here, accomplished a working inference pipeline, Y number. The number is 15 million requests a month, this is already an impact. And context, how, Z, by designing a SageMaker-based inference pipeline. So here you can see that the X and Z are a bit joined together. And finally, coordinated delivery under fixed quarterly budget of 100K OPEX. The accomplishment is coordinating the delivery. This includes coordinating different teams and planning resources for the inference. It is measured with a quarterly budget of 100K, this is Y, and Z is also hidden here in the coordinated delivery collocation. This includes coordination of data scientists, DevOps, business people together, and helping them achieving milestones. I have mentioned this already briefly, and you may have guessed this, but these are exactly the bullet points which look super solid in your resume. So that's why there is a hint to sync with resume. So you first polish them in the very good format XYZ, and then just copy paste into your resume. Finally, the story. We have already covered tons of useful outcomes based on your raw or brag column. Now it's time to create a polished, concise one. This story is something you can tell to your colleague at a coffee point, or to your manager, or even a skip manager to convince them about the promotion. A shorter version may be even your elevator pitch about your achievements. And of course you can use this on interviews to rapidly show your impact. We'll talk more about this STARL framework in the next section of the video. But as of now, the idea is a neat and to the point 1-minute story about the project. Let me read this example as a short, coherent story. There was a situation that LinkedIn's quality team was manually checking about 3.5 million paid listings a month, which required about 90 FTEs. Free listings were mostly unverified, causing spam and brand risk. The task for me on this project was to deliver a scalable LLM-based text quality checker within Q1 and 100K inference budget. What I did, I negotiated scope freeze with the stakeholders, replaced rule system and OpenAI API with fine-tuned Llama 3 on SageMaker. Designed Kafka to Lambda to SageMaker pipeline with Datadog monitoring and automated rollback. Overall, I led the implementation of all these activities. As a result, the coverage increased 4 times, manual work of subject matter experts decreased 40%, review service level agreement dropped from 3 days to 8 hours, and the cost of one inference was about this price. I presented the results to the Vice President of Engineering and secured the budget for Phase 2. On this project, I learned the following. It is super important to write on paper the deliverables together with the stakeholders, and it was also very useful to utilize postmortems technique as a leadership tool. Finally, the date. May sound obvious, but it's important. You may remember that our brag column may have some dates. It is not necessary, but good to have. Anyway, brag entries are facts or your thoughts as they are while you're working on something. Work log is rarely edited after you finish a project. And it is needed to understand the way you were thinking and what you were focused on. But months or years later, you look at this through the lens of experience. And you start noticing new mistakes, some learnings from the past which are affecting the way you do your job right now, years later. Hence, this is very helpful to refresh your distilled columns around every half a year so that you have your conclusions up to date. And this is what I use that date updated for. Once again, from time to time, you dedicate an hour to think and reflect on some past projects to update these columns. Then you refresh the date so that you know that you can trust your notes in case of an urgent preparation for an interview. Lastly, I have tried to use color coding so that the outdated projects become more red and kind of asking for your attention. However, it didn't look good, but more about color coding in the behavior section. Here, I leave experiments on you. Before we move on, there is another amazing capability of such a document. This helps with your performance reviews, even at the current place of work. We all know these people who start taking extra work and try to get more visibility a couple of months before the annual performance review. Unfortunately, management clearly sees such spiked performance, and usually this is not enough for a promotion or a raise. What helps is to constantly work on this document, actively share your achievements with your management, and finally have a solid list of achievements throughout the year, so that your sponsor will be able to defend your candidacy. Remember, nobody is interested in your progress more than you. There is an amazing motivating video about this. It is called Don't Do Invisible Work by Chris Alban. The link will be in the description. It is not intentional, but his ideas about the workload are very similar to what we have in our brag column. So watch this and take your portion of motivation. The project section will definitely help you to be credited for your work. Finally, the main takeaways for the section. First, the projects table is a great way to structure your achievements for your future employer. Second, the projects table is a great way to structure your achievements for your current employer. Third, the projects table helps you realize quickly that what you are doing or asked to do has no value for you and the company. Therefore, you can prioritize your activities better. Fourth, self-recognition. Personally, I get a very warm and rewarding feeling when I look back at how many unusual and useful things I have done for the various companies I have worked for. At this stage, you have a solid portfolio of past projects. Moreover, you have valuable notes with facts and countables so that you can easily talk about what you did and what value did you bring. Now we switch to the peculiar tricky area called Behavioural Questions. Usually, this interview section assesses your past actions to predict your future job performance. Typically, questions sound like, tell me about a time when, and are used to evaluate skills like problem solving, communication, leadership, and many others. First of all, you have to know what questions to expect. Where do I search questions? I start with the websites like Indeed, which have the most common questions that appear everywhere. Let's look at a couple. Give me an example of a time you had a conflict with a team member. How did you handle it? Or another one. Tell me about a time you made a mistake at work. How did you resolve the problem and what did you learn from your mistake? Describe an occasion when you had to manage your time to complete a task. How did you do it? I name these questions a must-have dozen. Secondly, search questions per position. For example, I, as a data scientist, often get questions like, describe a time when you used data to convince a stakeholder, or tell me about a time you had to make an urgent decision without any data. Here are some other examples. Of course, questions to managers and different kinds of developers might differ significantly, but make sure you know the specifics of the position you apply for. Don't forget about the maturity level. Questions for junior and staff level, even for the same title, may focus on completely different things. Here are some examples of the questions for a junior software engineer. Never say never, but I would not expect this question to a seasoned software engineer with 15 years of experience in the field. Optimize your search per company. There is an enormous amount of materials with nitty-gritty details for every big tech company. For example, this guide describes Amazon core values. Amazon calls these leadership principles, or LPs. Such guides do a great job on dissecting interviewing principles of different companies with specific points they are looking at, with of course relevant examples of questions. Some questions may be super unique for some companies. Similarly to lead code, some companies tend to ask similar questions or just questions tailored to some particular facets. So do your research, and maybe somewhere on the web you'll find what is trending for your particular position. Finally, and this one is optional, you can find ideas while scrolling through social media. I would not recommend following too many grifters, hustle bros, or self-proclaimed thought leaders. I had to Google these terms, by the way. But occasionally I do pick up interesting questions while doom scrolling through LinkedIn influencers. Why do I show all these? Even before you started writing your answers, the set of questions you prepare for determines how you will look like during the real interview. If you practice 2 junior questions, don't expect to sound confident at a staff level interview, because you will train yourself to answer too low level. On the other hand, focusing too much on your soft skills may be not enough when applying for a purely software engineering position. I mean, sometimes people expect you to cover briefly that you performed some technical actions and this solved some technical problem. With all that said, start with the must-haves and the most frequent ones, add those relevant to your specific role and level, and make sure your set is diverse enough to reflect your full experience. Now you have a list of questions to work on. Here is my example. Our goal will be to answer these questions in a specific format using the information from the past projects, which is in the previous tab. There are different ways to do this, however there is a couple of methods rated in the industry. The STAR method includes 4 steps: situation, task, action, and result. While answering the behavioral interview question, you do this in the following format. You introduce the situation to employer and set the context. Secondly, you describe the task you had to complete, including the expectations and challenges it would involve. Third, action. Explain what you did and how you did it. And finally, the result. And with the results of your efforts, including accomplishments, rewards, and impact. This is the most used framework in behavioral interviews. Interestingly, many resume coaches recommend it for structuring not only your behavioral answers, but also for achievements and presentations. I will cover this later briefly. There is an obvious extension with the learning step. It becomes critical for big tech, as they always expect that you reflect on your past activities. So these are STAR and STARL, or STARL. And there are 2 alternative methods: problem action result, PAR, and challenge action result, CAR. From what I know, they are just variations used in career coaching, especially for executive resumes. My goal here is not to teach you these frameworks, but I certainly encourage you to read the ideas and nuances behind them. Nevertheless, they are all more or less about the same. I use some kind of a combination of all. You can see how I adapted these. Situation remains the same, task and problem are together, action is together with the solution, and result is together with the impact. During an interview, questions may be tailored more to situations or challenges or problems. Very likely for you it's just a matter of phrasing. That's why I keep them together and use a unified approach. Now let's study our example in more details. Remember, you first use your notes and thoughts from the project sheet, find a good use case for this question, then return here and start answering. Of course, as on the previous sheet, there are service columns like when this happened, in which company, when did you last work on this story, some comments for you in the future. But let's start from the left. Here I keep the category. There may be multiple categories assigned to each question, but I try to keep only one here. Depending on which company you prepare for, these may be, for example, Amazon leadership principles, or just some very high-level categories of the questions like conflict resolution, proactivity, and so on. Here are the keywords. These may be just rephrasing of the category or just some keywords related to your particular story. Here we're talking about resolving a conflict with a coworker, so that's why the keywords will be stress management, empathy, teamwork, and communication. So let me read the situation. Near the end of a busy quarter, a teammate I'd worked well with for over a year started showing frustration and blaming me for project delays. It was clear something deeper than just deadlines was going on, and the tension began affecting the team. So this is the situation, or challenge. To some extent this is a problem, so these two may be combined or kind of split between two, but in our case I have just meant that this is a situation. Usually when you have such kind of a situation or challenge, the problem is straightforward. So my task or problem was, I needed to resolve the conflict quickly, restore trust, and keep the project on track without escalating the situation. What was my solution, or what actions did I take? First, I scheduled a few one-to-one talks to understand what was behind the tension. Secondly, learned that my colleague was under heavy stress and felt overwhelmed. It wasn't a personal issue. Third, took over some urgent tasks to ease their load and show support. Fourth, adjusted our future plans to better fit their working pace and preferred communication style. Lastly, checked in regularly over the next few weeks to make sure things stayed stable. What was the result or impact of these actions in this situation? As a result, the relationship fully recovered and teamwork improved. We met our quarterly goals without escalation. The colleague later thanked me for handling it calmly and respectfully. What I learned from this situation and from this use case? Address tension early, as soon as possible. Listen before reacting, so you can see here that I first reacted to collect my information and only then started doing something. And finally, offer practical help. Empathy builds stronger teams than confrontation. I could say that, hey, it's your problem, these are your tasks, you can do this yourself, but as a plane captain, I was able to support and take some tasks of this person, and this helped to build better trust. And finally, we have a quick comment here, to check if not too junior. So this is my comment to myself to check if this story is still useful for the level I apply for. For example, the solution may be too junior because I just took tasks from some person, while it would be better to organize their work in a different way. This is an example or just random thought of what I could do better potentially. And this is the story. Later, you can just search it by the keywords or just utilize this story for similar kind of questions when you are asked about a conflict and how you resolve this. You can briefly adapt this story to something related to stress management, to empathy, and other keywords. Remember, you can phrase this in the STARL format or any other one. This is pretty agnostic to the exact framework, but it definitely contains all the information you need for a proper answer. And this is it for the first story. This was a company agnostic story, which you can use straight away or adapt later to some particular company. Why adapt? Very likely there is some character trait or behavior pattern an interview expects from you between the lines. For some companies, this is on the surface. For others, you have to really make an effort to address the right point of the question. Anyway, you have to study company values. For example, 10 things we know to be true is one of the sources which is worth your time. The first thing, focus on the user and all else will follow, is very similar to Amazon's customer obsession. Learn this before the interview, adapt your stories, or even your current work behavior so that you're 100% concentrated on your customers and users. You can use interview tips directly from companies themselves. Let's look at one trait most of the companies are going to ask you about: leadership. This is our second example. Describe a situation where no one was officially in charge, but you took the lead. In this example, I put an extra stress to the leadership and also other Google's values like emergent leadership, ambiguity, influence without authority, stakeholder alignment, prioritization, deliver under pressure. Again, this example is specifically tailored to Google and its values. For other companies, this may be adjusted differently. The situation. I was a part of a team building a new data product for business clients. 2 weeks before launch, a new requirement came up. We had to match results from the old model. It was critical for clients, but no one was leading the change, and communication between developers and stakeholders got messy. The task or the problem were the following. We needed to add the new check, keep the launch date, and calm the team. My actions were the following. Even without being an official lead, I stepped up. First, I confirmed with both sides that the new rule was truly needed. Secondly, I collected all requests and issues in one shared document. Third, helped the team to estimate work and used effort impact matrix to set priorities. Fourth, explained the stakeholders what we could realistically deliver before launch. 5. Set up a simple process for bugs, tickets, and progress tracking. As a result, we launched on time and met clients' expectations. Teammates and managers appreciated on the town hall the clear structure and teamwork. From this case, I learned the following. Leadership isn't about title, it's about bringing clarity and focus when things get uncertain. And as previously, we have some service columns, we have the category, I may have multiple questions related to one category of leadership. I can similarly adapt the same story to another company like Amazon, so the category will be the same and the keywords may be a bit different because the companies are concentrated on a bit different traits. I use color coding more extensively here. I proofread the answers from time to time. If I feel that the story is still strong regardless how old it is, I keep it and mark green. If I see that the story has to be updated, I mark it with yellow. This story still can be used and I still scan through it while preparing so that it is in my cache. Finally, if a story may be even more harmful than helpful, I mark it as red. I had multiple cases of such stories. For example, several years ago, I would say that going extra mile with overtimes would be a good answer for a question about a technical problem solved. But after becoming more senior, I would prefer an answer including processes review, post-mortem analysis, and some delegation. If I answer too junior, I would not be considered for a senior plus position. This is not only about interviews, but the overall mindset and priorities. Sometimes I play with shadows like juicy green means coherent and brilliant story, while light green is just a good and solid story. I hope you get the idea with the colors. For example, my table sometimes looks like a Christmas garland. There are also several thoughts I want to share regarding writing and using these. Advice number 1. Adjust the answers to the level and the company you are targeting. Advice number 2. Play with your format. I spent a lot of time polishing my stories using catchy, touching phrases. I was trying to make them exciting, rhythmic, having vocabulary way above my normal. However, I was not able to remember them properly, not to mention reproducing during stressful interviews. I ended up just with bullet points, so that every time my speech is fresh and natural, and I have to remember less. On these examples, I demonstrate you a mixed approach. The situations are written as plain text, while, for example, learnings are given as a bullet point list. Sometimes I can frame these completely differently. For example, with this bullet point, I can say, it is always better to listen first and then react. Or maybe in other words, I prefer to collect the information first and then do some actions. I hope you'll find the format that works for you. There is an interesting observation. AI doesn't help much. I have even tried to create GPTs and agents over my resume, past projects, LinkedIn, but this never worked faster and with better quality than I can achieve myself. I do not advise you to avoid AI at all. For me it helps with ideation, rephrasing and rehearsing, more on this later, but I, as an interviewer myself, feel quite negative about synthetic and polished answers during interviews. This is a big sign that something is wrong here. Finally, a life hack. While answering, I usually state this super explicitly, that the situation was the following, the task was this one. This simplifies interviewer's job, and you kind of show them that you are ready to play their game on their field. Because in 95% of cases, they expect STAR or STARL formats and they are ready to take notes in exactly this format, and you will confuse them if you do not follow it. I also want to make a note on hypothetical questions. Hypothetical questions like, what would you do if, are sometimes considered as behavioral ones. Let's look at a couple of examples. What would you do if you were put into a situation where you were required to put an additional effort to complete a task? Or another one. What if I instructed you to make a change to your schedule that warranted you to prioritize a separate obligation over finishing a task at work? Or another one. What if you had to work with a difficult coworker on a task? Very frequently, it is perfectly fine to clarify with your interviewer, would it be fine if I link an answer to this question to some situation in the past I had? Very likely you will get a green light and you'll be able to answer what would you do in a future hypothetical situation using your actual and of course correct behavior from the past. The underneath qualities you possess remain the same. If you understand why the question is asked, it's already part of the right answer. As for purely hypothetical ones, for example, when you are not able to tailor this to your past experience or you are not allowed to do so, let's leave them for a separate lecture. There are 2 bonus materials I want to include into this section. They require additional attention while they are a bit different from what we have already discussed. Bonus 1. There are several questions which you have to be able to answer anytime and anywhere. Examples. Tell me about yourself. Why company X? Why you leave your current company? Honestly speaking, they require a bit different format, and usually they should strictly fit 60 or even 30 seconds depending on where they are asked. But I have tried to adapt them to my structure, and so far it works well enough. I keep these questions together with the answers on the very top of this document during the time I have communication with each specific company. Answers obviously have to be adapted to these companies. And very likely you will be repeating these answers at every stage of the interviewing process you have: HR, technical, behavioral, hiring manager, and other stages. Every interviewer should promptly understand who are you and why you are here. Let's look at our example. Here is how I format this question. Tell me about yourself, position X, company Y, and when it is happening. As I have mentioned, this will be at the very top of my document, so that I will be refreshing this very frequently, and I will remember that at the very beginning of each interview stage, regardless what exact stage it is, I will be asked who am I and why I'm here. You can notice that this doesn't naturally fit the STARL format we used, but I split this into 4 passages and I see some parallels with the situation and problem solved. Let's read through this. The category is introduction. You may have multiple introductions for different companies. Keywords: introduce yourself, company Y, for example, this may be Google, Amazon, and many others. So the first one. I'm Oleg Litvinov, a lead data scientist at EPAM Systems, where I've been for almost 8 years. I remember this by heart. At EPAM, I lead teams to design, build, and maintain machine learning solutions for our clients. My work involves finding ways to use machine learning for innovation, automation, and delivering real business value. So this is kind of situation where I am at. The second passage is kind of a problem I have solved recently. For example, on a recent project for a company Z, I led the delivery of something. This solution was estimated 2 million euros in annual value. In this passage, I kind of talk about my activities. Throughout my time at EPAM, I worked on projects across diverse industries like retail, technology, and telecom. On projects, I always extensively collaborate with product and cross-functional teams. I regularly present technical strategy and results directly to client leadership, sometimes including CEO. And finally, I end with some result or impact or future. This combination of GenAI expertise and client leadership is exactly why I'm so excited about this role at company Y. This is the company you apply for. I believe my experience makes me well equipped to help company Y succeed with GenAI. So this is an end-to-end example of how I would introduce myself. Consider this framework or this adaptation from the standardization perspective, but don't forget to dedicate enough time to prepare for this kind of questions using corresponding literature. Bonus number 2. Follow-up questions. Sometimes you clearly see that you cannot fit all your wisdom in a 2-minute answer. Therefore, you try to cover as many latent points as possible in your main answer, but be prepared to dive into any of the follow-ups coming from an interviewer. Here is how I practice such situations. I duplicate the same question over the lines, and I additionally highlight a potential follow-up. Our example is the following. Describe a time when you had to make a quick decision with limited data. And let's say we're able to describe a situation, task, action, and result. And we try to make it a bit quicker than we do usually. So here is our regular answer, for example, aiming 3-5 minutes. And we have a shorter one, aiming, for example, 2 minutes. And then we synthesize several follow-ups. How did you balance speed and accuracy? What risks did you consider before acting? Did you validate your decision later? How? Or how did the team respond to your decision at the time? While both practicing and answering, there is no need to set the stage again. So in the original one, you state the situation and the task, but later with the follow-ups, you just answer directly your action and result based on the follow-up question. As a final thought for the follow-ups, try both long and short answers. And this is how I fill the table. Before we proceed, let me make a note on the collection expansion. Before any behavioral interview, you must cover at least 10 unique must-have questions. Without this, I do not recommend to play the game because you just do not know the rules. Then, from time to time, you can source new questions in the areas you feel weak. At the moment, I have around 40 unique questions and overall more than 100 lines in my documents because of the number of companies I was adapting my answers to. This doesn't give me immunity, but certainly gives me confidence. But how to learn these? The third and the last section I'm going to dedicate to the actual preparation. During the interview, you have to be able to answer these questions with relatively little delay. Usually companies are willing to give you around 30 seconds to remember the case, and sometimes 1-2 minutes to make some written notes. So you have to teach yourself two things. Remember the stories very well, and be able to adapt stories to different contexts. I came up with several drills or exercises I practice. I call the first one the key value game or the dictionary game. The idea of the drill is the following. You either scroll through a random sample of questions on the web, like one of the sources we discussed previously, or you ask somebody to randomly name questions or topics, and your goal here is to find the most corresponding case or project from your past experience. No need for details now. For example, question about a conflict, case with Bob. Question about failure and fix, project X. Question about the biggest win, project Y. Because the set of your cases or past experience is likely limited, while the number of questions is potentially infinite, you should learn how to adapt cases on the fly. First, you should learn to stay comfortable when asked a random topic out of the blue. Later, you just try to give 1-2 sentences idea of your answer. For example, question about a conflict, case with Bob when he was upset with something and I proactively investigated and helped. Then with about 1 sentence per each step of the STARL. And finally, you master it to the level when you are able to answer with a full, fluent, breathtaking speech. So try yourself, try with the friends, try with a voice assistant. If you are a bit more methodical, you can adapt this or a similar drill into Anki cards. You can see I use Anki quite actively. I use it for studying A/B testing, algorithms and data structures, data management, linear algebra, loss functions, some ranking metrics, regression metrics, and many others. And I have created the behavioral deck, for example. Basically, the rules are the same as I have described for the key value game. You can start with 1-sentence cards to train to adapt faster, and then try full cards as I have now. I have an example of a card which is basically a copy-paste from the Excel table. Tell me about yourself, position X, company Y, November 2025. And if I press white space, I see the answer. So the answer is basically the copy-paste from the Excel sheet. And as always, you can experiment with your ideal format. This may be the full story like I have on the screen, or just situation, task, and other parts separately. There is one amazing resource called Pramp, Practice Makes Perfect. Now, as I understand, it's a part of Exponent. You can use it relatively free to practice with peers on the web. I have tried here behavioral, data science, lead coding, all are excellent. The last thing I do a lot is rehearse using audio. I use a default recorder on my phone or just voice messages, and while preparing I record several stories. Then, while walking outside, I just listen to them on repeat. Helps you realize how boring your stories actually are, by the way. But I think it helps to remember them better. Finally, the option which I didn't try but was thinking of is visualization. You can consider building some graphs or mind maps based on your stories or service fields like categories or keywords. A quick note on cheating. I think it is quite useful to have your sheet open while practicing your answers with friends or AI. You can even implement some filtering by service fields or some RAG to make your practice more comfortable. But don't get too used to it, as it is very likely considered as cheating for most of the companies. Now you have practiced a lot, but what to do before the interview? I use multiple stickers related to this particular interview right at the bottom of my monitor. The first type of stickers contains company values. I have many different stickers for multiple companies. This is an example for Google. I hope you can see it. Let me read through this. It has bullet points. Comfort with ambiguity, bias to action, collaborative, playing captain, delivery results. You really have to find the right balance on how explicit you want to be. It would be weird if after every sentence you say, yeah, I'm comfortable with ambiguity, I am biased to action, and by the way, I get things done. Sometimes mention these company values more explicitly, sometimes make it between the lines to avoid being annoying. I also use some hints specifically for me. One of such examples is low voice, speak slower, count to 5 before answering. Here is the sticker. There are some feedback stickers from my close people, my mentor, even from my subscribers. I also have reminders about not using filler words. Next, interview tailored. Specific hints for different interviews like hiring manager, hiring director, salary negotiation. Learn whom are you going to talk to. Think what may interest them. Note this down. It's better to clarify with the interviewer, but sometimes you're allowed to use brief written notes. Here you can use your dictionary like resolving a conflict, story A, performing under pressure, story B. If possible, ask your recruiter or even interviewer about the exact format and the expected duration of your answers. You may be surprised, but this worked for me many times. Especially in the Gen AI field, the interviewing process is still establishing, and therefore some companies openly share the exact format because this is not similar to the classical software engineering one, and it is in their interest if candidates understand the rules and know what to prepare for. Don't forget to help your interviewer. Name situation, task, action, result, and learning explicitly. As for all other stages of your interviewing process, have your after-session questions prepared. To wrap it up, 1. Use this framework in the order I showed. Brag column, distilled columns, STARL stories. 2. Calibrate your stories to company and role. 3. Practice makes perfect. And most importantly, 4. This all is not only about interview. Praise yourself, celebrate your growth, and don't forget your amazing work. I can only wish you good luck with your interviews. I truly hope this framework helps you feel confident and land your dream job. And as always, thank you for watching.